Welcome to our panel. This is the PAM Caucus's panel at the CFA Equity Conference. The title of our panel is Student Faculty Suppression at CSU Campuses, Healing the Wounds of Injustice. And we have with us here today, Sang-Hye Akhila from San Jose State, John Caravello from Channel Islands, and Angel Marie Taylor, who's also from Channel Islands. And we also have with us Kiara Lee and Adrina Redman, who are our CFA staff who've really facilitated this whole panel. So without further ado, I will pass it to Sang to lead us with our California land acknowledgement. Unmute.
Thank you. So we want to acknowledge that we gather as the California Faculty Association on the traditional land of the California Indian people, past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. This calls us to commit to continuing to learn how to be better stewards of the land we inhabit as well. To recognize the land is an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those whose territory we reside on, and a way of honoring the indigenous people who have been living and working on the land from time immemorial. It's important to understand the long history that has brought us to reside on the land of the Californian Indian people and to seek to understand our place within that history. Land acknowledgements do not exist in the past tense or historical context. Colonialism is a current, ongoing process, and we need to build our mindfulness of our present participation. The California Indian people are very much a part of today's California, living and working and caring for the land as they've always done. Acknowledging the land is an important Indigenous protocol that we are honoring here today.
We'll turn to Angel Marie for our Cal State LA's labor and life affirmation.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Today, we pay homage to those who were stolen from Africa, placed in bondage, falsely named as chattel, and forced into labor, who were called slaves, but never submitted as such, who have always been fully human and with unbroken connection to the divine and to each other. We honor our African ancestors for the still unpaid labor, which built what is now the Americas. To both our Indigenous and African forebears, we commit to the continued struggle for liberation and reparations, for it is only through freedom and justice that we truly give honor. Ashe.
And finally, I'll read our CFA interruption practice statement. As part of our continuing commitment to racial justice work, when we experience examples of racial narratives, racism, or whiteness in our meeting, or as we conduct our business, we will address it. This means we can interrupt the meeting and draw the issue to one another's attention. We will do this kindly, with care, and in good faith. Further, as we engage interruptions, we will take an intersectional approach, reflecting the fact that white supremacy and racism operate in tandem with interlocking systems of oppression, of colonialism, racial capitalism, class, cis heteropatriarchy, and ableism. This statement is a reminder that we commit to do this in the service of ending the system of racial oppression. And I will pass it to Kiara for some logistics notes before we get started.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Just a few logistics notes for today and throughout Equity Conference. Friendly reminder to please update your Zoom name to reflect your full name, your pronouns, and your campus if you would. Closed captioning and American Sign Language services are being provided today. To turn on your closed captioning, you may activate by clicking on the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen, and then you can click Show Subtitle to view those captions. Our ASL interpreters will be spotlighted along with our speakers throughout the webinar. The chat and raise hand functions will be disabled, but the Q&A feature will be enabled for us. Please note that this session will be recorded and posted at a later date to our CFA YouTube page and the Council for Racial and Social Justice webpage. Lastly, please check out our Equity Caucus landing page that I will be dropping in chat after I voice these logistics notes, as all of this information and other helpful bits of information will be found on that Equity Conference landing page. Thank you and enjoy the session, everyone. Back to you.
I didn't at the beginning introduce Elizabeth Uloa, who's our ASL interpreter. Much appreciation. Okay. Welcome. I wish sincerely that we weren't here at all. Over 150 days into this current phase of genocide in Gaza, where over 30,000 Palestinians have been killed by Israel, with the backing of the United States and other countries, and the silence of most other nations who might otherwise represent justice. This includes over 12,000 or 1% of all children living in Gaza, where schools no longer exist in building materials, where over 400,000 homes have been destroyed, where the only medical option for birthing people experiencing complications are hysterectomies, where hospitals and paramedics en route to rescue children trapped in cars are bombed, where dozens of infants, children, and adults have died of starvation, where creators and writers and weavers and home chefs have been brutally murdered by a steep escalation of a 75-year-old occupation. That number will only rise as 1.3 million Gazans are currently facing catastrophic levels of famine and other crises. What haunts me in my own personal grief is the fact that so many of these inconceivably large numbers are still under rubble, their families unable to mourn them as their traditions dictate. What this unending reality has incited are mass resistance movements across the globe at every level that institutions and even simple interactions operate. Many of us here have engaged our families, our communities, our schools, workplaces, local officials, federal officials, the United States president, corporate CEOs, arts institutions, labor unions, sports federations, and the list goes on, not to mention the individual Zionists we face, repeating racist and murderous propaganda who have threatened, doxed, and harassed us. We have resisted institutions that actively want to eliminate us, and we have resisted institutions who claim to represent us and the social justice principles we stand for. We are here today to bear witness to one slice of that massive surge in movement toward Palestinian liberation and the liberation of oppressed people worldwide, the experiences of incredible student activists from across the CSU system, whose powerful movement work for a free Palestine has been silenced, suppressed, and assailed. Of note in the specific testimony we highlight today are the ways that Islamophobic and anti-Arab Zionist logics overlap with anti-Black carceral logics in the United States in the experiences of and on the bodies of Black students engaging in resistance work. This is not a point to be taken lightly. When Black students, and especially Black femme students, are leading direct actions, the surveillance and psychic terrorism of the police state in this country and on our university campuses are alarmingly escalated. I find students' work in the CSU to be an endless source of inspiration, proof positive that the revolutionary spirit or spirits of movement martyrs are with us after all. I hope we learn from these students and figure out new ways to shift our institutions, to foment more of the resistance they present and represent in this shattered world. And I also hope we realign our work as faculty, as university and union staff to defend and protect those at the most vulnerable intersections of identity and identification. So I will pass it to John Caravello first, who will give us, who will lead the panel today.
Thank you, Akhila, and everyone who is here taking time out of their day to attend this important event. I'm going to share screen. Hopefully everything goes well with my presentation here. Okay, if I could just get a confirmation by yeah, we're good. Okay. All right, so in 2020, we saw the biggest social uprising in history, a response to the ever worsening racist policing in the United States. Since the Black Lives Matter protests of 2020 against police brutality and the direct call to reimagine and reconstruct our country's policing that came with the uprising, police killings are higher than they've ever been. Policing has been funded even more. Surveillance has been cranked up, and the hegemonic narrative has been reinforced. University campuses are no different. Police brutality hasn't let up. Funding for the university police departments has steadily increased over the past decade, and universities continue to play into the status quo. Now, the purpose of US policing is not to protect and serve, unless by that you mean they protect and serve the interests of the ruling class. The purpose of US policing, both historically and now, is to protect the profit-making ventures on the settler colonial project we call the United States of America. The CSU, too, has provided funds towards more police, towards heightened surveillance, towards militarized weapons on our campuses, all for these profit-making ventures. The CSU, in short, has added fuel to the fire. But what has CFA done? What have they done to fight for justice in the wake of the 2020 uprisings, more specifically? SQE relaunched a Cops Off Campus campaign, extending work started in 2017. SQE is the organization Students for Quality Education. In 2017, the Justice for Josiah campaign materialized to demand justice for a Black Humboldt State student leader who was murdered. CFA turned their focus to safety at Humboldt State and created a committee to look into safety on campuses, eventually leading to looking into problems with policing on CSU campuses. CFA and SQE then successfully lobbied to pass legislation directing the CSU to convene a work group on alternatives to policing. The CSU lagged to create this work group, so CFA created, in the meantime, their own subcommittee towards these things. The CSU finally created a work group about a year later, and it includes a police officer. The subcommittee, in the meantime, collected and synthesized policing data from across the CSU. This is the first time such data was collected. Now, the CFA subcommittee is now called the Community Wellbeing Committee, and they still meet. They work on a bifurcated strategy, both collecting, analyzing, and releasing police data, maybe even writing papers on it, and then holding the CSU accountable with the governmental relations campaign, ultimately. There is still more data to be collected and analyzed, and the work group that the CSU convened still has to report back to the state eventually. Now, a single-minded a single-minded reliance on our legal institutions here makes no sense. Our legal institutions are part of fanning the flames to the problems that we face. However, it is a piece of the strategy. Legislative action and all that goes into it, political lobbying, political research, and so on, is useless without a movement by the people and for the people. And so other things are necessary as well. Things like protest of all types, political education, deprogramming from years of miseducation, decolonizing, community building, survival programs, and maybe even starting a party, supporting a party that actually stands for the oppressed people around the world. Those in power know that these things are necessary, and this is why they have unleashed suppression in the way they have. The theme assigned today to our panel is trouble the water. As the pressure builds, millions of people around the world enter the streets, block weapons manufacturers, disrupt our politicians' business as usual, boycott corporations like Coke and Starbucks. Let's make it clear, we aren't just letting off steam. The fog is lifting. Now, the California State University has ties with Israeli universities with their study abroad programs. CSU administrators are quick to send out messaging about increase in anti-Semitism, but silent on the structural oppression against Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims. Their actions and their silence have contributed to the increasing violence against, harassment and suppression of PAM campus community members and anyone who speaks up for justice in Palestine or the movement associated with it. What has been their response more recently? That's what we will get into. I won't read all of these, but I will give some examples, and I will be general about them so as to not reveal any information about people. At Cal Poly SLO, there was police brutality against students demonstrating against weapons manufacturers on campus. Also at SLO, there were arrests and suspensions. At San Jose, you'll hear more of that later, but there were disciplinary reprimands and assaults. At CSU San Bernardino, an email filter was used to censor the use of the word genocide. At Channel Islands, my campus, I received a letter of counsel, which I will speak of soon. Universities have released statements to the media that stigmatize PAM campus community members and their allies by likening them to terrorists. And it's only a matter of time, if it hasn't already happened, that those in power will infiltrate our student and faculty organizations. All of these tactics are CIA tactics. Through a combination of those tactics and just general old gaslighting and other manipulative tactics, they've reinforced all of these terrible, terrible things. Two things we'll speak of specifically here are the creation of time, place, and manner policies, which are aimed at limiting disruptions, and these not quite letters of reprimand. I'm not going to read this page. I'll leave it up there for you, but I want to say a few things about it. I'm not asking, personally, I'm not asking for a protection of free speech. I'm asking my institutions to defend what is just. Speaking up about Palestine and calling it genocide is just. Chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free is just. Condemning Zionism for the racist political ideology that it is just. Safety, security, and peace are racially coded words. Injustices continue not because we are mean to each other, but because they are the inevitable outcome of a social and political system fueled by the pursuit of profit. The continual attempt to erase the existence of Palestinians, of Palestine, and of the culture of the Palestinians is felt when the president of a university campus sends out an email that mentions Jewish members of the community and not Muslims. It's felt when anti-Zionism is conflated with anti-Semitism. It is felt when we have these vapid promises of empathic safe spaces, but nothing that really backs them up. Silence can speak volumes, and the CSU has thus far made no explicit statement condemning the harassment and abuse of PAM campus community members and their allies. We have gotten only statements of both sides. To this point, Richard Yao, the president of CSU Channel Islands, sent out an email last semester explaining his feelings about what he was calling the conflict in Israel-Gaza. There he says that we should walk, limp, and roll together with insistence for the rule of law that is under threat around the globe. This is coded language. I responded to this email, sent it out to as many people on campus as I could, and a couple weeks later, I received a letter of counsel, a counseling memorandum, because I spoke of my views on Palestine in one of my classes. This memorandum, of which this is only a part, spoke towards honest, inclusive reasoned discussion and the necessity for it, but said ultimately that my class was not the appropriate place to talk about Palestine. Right? I was told instead to go to things like the peaceful teach-in in solidarity with Palestine. And I was there, and I did read my statement that I sent to the president. And during that event, the student who put it on, his car was keyed. Did the university do anything about this? No. Did they release a statement about this? No. As you can see, the reason that I got this letter, the reason it went to administration was ultimately because someone in my class felt that my discussion of Palestine was one-sided, that they felt unsafe, and that my rhetoric was inflammatory. Now, I was told that, hey, it's okay. Look, as long as you don't do anything more towards this will all go away. The letter was put on to memorialize a discussion I had with administration, but it could lead to a stronger action against me, like a letter of reprimand. Now, I wonder if a professor passionately speaks of Israel's so-called right to exist, or against the use of the word genocide, or against the use of armed resistance by a colonized people to overcome their oppressors by any means necessary, would the university hold it over their head with the hopes that it would have a chilling effect? That is what they did to me. It did affect me psychologically. I've since overcome that, and I continue to speak about Palestine in class. Now, for legal reasons, I'll state this as a question. Is it that what I'm speaking about and how I'm speaking about it doesn't align with my course's learning outcomes, as the letter says? Or is it that what I'm speaking about and how I'm speaking about it doesn't align with the profit-making ventures of the settled frontier we call the United States? Sometimes an issue is so pressing, we must speak up on it. Political prisoner Mumia Abu Jamal says, when a cause comes along and you know in your bones that it's just, yet refuse to defend it, at that moment you begin to die. And I've never seen so many corpses walking around talking about justice. So the CSU has failed utterly in defending us in our actions in line with the movement for justice in Palestine. What about CFA? Now, at Fall Assembly in October, CFA passed a statement created by the PAM caucus. After Assembly, PAM finalized a draft resolution and began trying to get it endorsed by individual executive boards at individual campuses. Certain boards refused to even discuss the resolution or put it up for vote. Later on, a best practices document was sent out by our statewide leadership, and although the intent was to make sure process was followed, it caused confusion as to whether any individual executive board could even bring this up for discussion. And as a matter of policy, at any point, we could have, as a union, through our board of directors, a 2/3 vote, called for a special meeting of the assembly and fast-tracked a passing of this very strong resolution in favor of justice in Palestine. On March 1st, our union signed a ceasefire statement 5 months into the genocide. It stated the union's position. The statement itself did not state this, but the messaging sent out with it did. It stated the union's position on academic freedom and free speech, citing the preamble to our CBA, and it acknowledged the existence of suppression against faculty and students. But in the statement itself, and the messaging, there was no mention of genocide, of Israeli war crimes, of settler colonialism, apartheid, or ethnic cleansing. There was no call to end all US aid or even just military aid to Israel, no call to release Palestinian political prisoners or hostages, no call to end the occupation or to ultimately to protect students and faculty in their actions aligned with Palestinian solidarity. And maybe worst of all, the messaging played into the ahistorical narrative that reinforces Zionist logic. And that is, I'll just read the quote, after the tragedy in Israel and Palestine began on October 7th. The labor movement is the movement for justice in Palestine. Does our union make statements of international solidarity? Historically, yes, we have. Should we make statements of international solidarity in this case? If we aim to be just, then we absolutely should. As Ghassan Kanafani, famous Palestinian, says, imperialism has laid its body over the world, the head in Eastern Asia, the heart in the Middle East, its arteries reaching Africa and Latin America. Wherever you strike it, you damage it, and you serve the world revolution. Thank you. I will pass now to Sang.
Great, thank you. Just give me a second to screen share. Hi, welcome. So I wear a couple of different hats at San Jose State University. I'm a professor in the Justice Studies Department. I also chair the Anti-Racism Social Justice Transformation Group for my union. And I'm also the faculty advisor for Students for Justice in Palestine. And for this equity conference, I co-chair the Palestine Arab Muslim Caucus. So just a little backstory. In Monday, about 3 weeks ago, President's Day, February 19th, we had a speaker who was a genocide denier in Gaza come to our campus. And it was originally supposed to be a public speech in the public library, King Library, and they moved it to a private classroom where me and several other Palestinian Solidarity student groups converged to do a action, basically, to exercise our free speech, to protest the contents and the speaker. And unfortunately, Jonathan Roth, who is a history professor, attacked a Palestinian protester, and I was witness to it. And so I just want to go through the backstory of Jonathan Roth, because since I'm a pro-Palestinian activist on my campus, and he is the leading Zionist on my campus, we have battled quite a bit over the years. So on November 4th, 2023, me and a fellow faculty member, a union member, did reach out to not only the statewide CFA, but my local CFA at San Jose State University, because we were alarmed at comments that Jonathan Roth made about Students for Justice for Palestine at my campus, where he said in the local student paper that my students basically supported terrorism. And I notified both the statewide union and my local union that this was libel and slander and created a dangerous environment for my students on campus. Here's an example that happened a few years ago where on an informal faculty listserv at my campus that he moderates and runs, he called Asian people white. Here's another example on that same forum where, because I'm actively pro-Palestinian and vocal about it, he equated my support for Palestine with support for all forms of terrorism around the world, and said that I supported the Taliban, for which he retracted, but still the accusation was laid. And for all these, I reported his behavior to the diversity office, to HR, and to my union in different combinations for different things. And none of these entities did anything to lift a finger to stop Jonathan Roth's problematic behavior. So the night before the speaker was supposed to come, I emailed the co-sponsors of the talk. So it was the Department of English and Comparative Literature, the Department of History, and also the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And I basically asked them to withdraw their co-sponsorship, and I gave my reasons why I thought that they needed to do that. And again, I emphasized that, you don't really want to advocate this person's opinions because he's publicly stated that, genocide's not happening in Gaza, as well as the dangers that it could pose to our campus community when official co-sponsorship of such speakers occur. So this is some of the social media promotion about this particular speaker. His name was Jeffrey Bloodinger, and he is from CSU Long Beach, and I believe he's their lead Zionist on that particular campus. So what happened? So I was there, I witnessed it. I saw Jonathan Roth arrive, and I watched him closely. And so we lined the hallways, and there are about 50 of us, mostly students and community members. And we allowed a passage down the hallway. We allowed doors to be open so that students could freely access their class. And I saw him walk down the middle of the hallway lined by protesters on either side. I saw a protester try to block his camera from taking pictures and video. And the reason why, she used her hand to block his video footage is because doxing is a very real thing. It's a form of suppression that is used against faculty, staff, students, and community members who speak out about Palestine. And I saw him grab her hand, twist her hand, and then like force it down towards the ground. And there was a brief melee as people tried to protect her from his assault. And then I saw SJSU PD get involved, and I saw a disparate treatment between what happened between Jonathan Roth and the other student protesters, which is the student protesters were roughly handled by SJSU PD, and Jonathan Roth was treated with kid gloves, basically. So here's a statement from the assaulted protester, who currently is anonymous, again, because of the threat of doxing and suppression of pro-Palestinian voices that are happening around the nation and also at San Jose State University. I was standing on the wall with everyone else and then saw him, Roth, angrily whispering things and shaking his head and walking down the hall towards the people on my left side. So I stayed close behind him to ensure he doesn't attack any of the students, at which point I see him taking his phone out and facing the students on my left sitting on the ground. I put my hand out to block the faces of the protesters from having their pictures taken of them without consent. He abruptly turned his camera into my face and put my hand out, not touching him or his or phone, and he reached out and grabbed my hand, twisting it down and my arm. And my hand is currently in pain and feels weak. After I got over the initial shock of being in the moment, I came to realize that my left hand, which he had violently twisted, was reddening and swollen compared to my right hand, and became concerned that the injury could be worse than I originally thought. After this, my friends tried to comfort and walked with me to the cafeteria, where I got an ice pack and wrapped my hand with it while sitting down for about an hour before going to get a second ice pack for my hand. Despite this, my hand was hurting me even more in that period of time and continues to hurt me now. Already, I didn't feel safe on this campus, given that they felt it was okay to invite a speaker who justified the genocide of my people. But now I feel even more unsafe as well, concerned for the safety of students on campus and faculty after being violently assaulted by the department head, who I've since learned has a history of harassing pro-Palestinian voices on campus. I'd like to just comment that San Jose State University, as well as my union, has never used the word genocide to describe what's happening in Gaza. And I do think that this contributes to an atmosphere of violence on campus and allows violence to happen to pro-Palestinian voices like our students. So CARE, which is the Council on American Islamic Relations, put out a press release about the incident. And I'm just going to cover some of the news coverage. So I felt that the only way to protect the students that were involved, as well as myself and the other participants, was to try to get as much media coverage about what happened as possible. Because I see San Jose State University administration as Zionist enablers, I didn't have any trust or faith in them in protecting our freedom of academic speech. And so I felt that the only way and really to ensure protection was to go on a very aggressive media campaign where I talked to and was quoted in almost, I think, 9 or 10 different outlets, for which I'm just going to give a short review. And the reason why I'm giving a short review is because I also want to show what John had highlighted earlier, that there is suppression also in the news media, even when they attempt to cover these types of suppression and assaults sympathetically. So the J Weekly was one of the first ones to come out, and they really focused on, some of the social media posts that said Zionists are not welcome at San Jose State University, and how Bloodinger, who is the speaker that was being protested, said it was a violation of civil discourse, and that we're just not interested in having discussion, that, basically that we're uncivil. This is an excerpt from the SF Chronicle. So again, this focus on Zionists not welcome here. And then also the fact that from the river to the sea was chanted, you know, they had to like point to the fact that that there are people that think that it's anti-Semitic. Again, trying to undermine the legitimacy of the protesters. This is an excerpt from the LA Times that covered this as well. Highlighting that, you know, Bledinger thought this was a violation of his academic freedom, and let him say this quote, "If we can allow people to shut down classes at the university because we don't like who's teaching it, then the public university will cease to exist." So pretty alarmist language for what I see as an exercise of free speech. This is an excerpt from Inside Higher Ed that show SJSU that Zionists are not welcome here. Again, this repeating of this narrative that Zionists are not welcome. Inside Higher Ed was exceptional in the sense that it allowed me to say this, which I think is very rarely said in mainstream news media, which is that if Zionism is a form of white settler colonialism, then it's also a form of white supremacy. And my students had every right to speak out against it and its promotion by our campus with their sponsorship of this speaker. I did thank the journalist for including that. And then here's the Chronicle of Higher Ed excerpts. So the pro-Palestinian activists don't see pushing back against speech they disagree with as impinging on other free speech rights. SJ Justice in Palestine at San Jose State told the Chronicle, or I'm sorry, I told the Chronicle that I saw the students protest of this Jewish professor's speech on February 19th as a form of good speech countering bad speech. And so I felt the need to try to push back basically against this Zionists not welcome, we're not allowing civil discourse, etc., by trying to give very elementary logics to why it was totally okay for my students and their allies to protest this particular person. So they quoted me as saying, "I'm not into banning people from ever coming, but I think that if they come and they want to say their bad speech, then it's totally acceptable for students, faculty, staff, and community members on that campus to fight that bad speech with good speech. If good speech is protest, if it's a shutdown, if it's a disruption, then it's all good to me." So I had to block out the president of the Students for Justice in Palestine's name in order to protect their identity, because again, doxing is real. But they did get a notice of conference for student organization from student conduct on our campus. This was related to the student walkouts, which they didn't organize, but only participated in, but they nevertheless were still hauled in. Even though it looks like it's unconnected, it very much is connected, because the fallout is that they're going to investigate claims about their violation of time, place, manner, which John talked about earlier. It's just a way to suppress students, this particular policy. And they threatened to put a letter in the Students for Justice for Palestine's student org file over it. So yeah, that is my overview. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And finally, Angel Marie.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna go ahead and start my screen share, if that's all right. Awesome. And please let me know if y'all can see this okay. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Angel Marie, pronoun she, they, shia. I am a senior here at CSU Channel Islands. I am a business with student suppression here in the CSU. I first want to give a brief overview to the many topics that I will be covering in my presentation. I will first be starting with academia versus community organizing. I do both. I am a student organizer as well as a community organizer, and it's really important for me, for the sake of this presentation, to highlight the difference between the two, how they affect one another, with an emphasis in the police harassment that I experienced in both fields. And then I want to dive into the types of student suppression that I and many other students, especially students of color, especially Black student organizers, have faced here in the CSU, including surveillance, time, place, and manner policy, and ultimately disenrollment as well. So here on the screen, you can see this footage. It's a very brief footage. That's because I was the one who took it, of a police officer who was called on me for suspicious activity as I was replacing a tire just off the side of the road, right outside of campus, because apparently a Black young woman replacing a tire at nighttime is suspicious. I really want to be able to speak to this because, as you can clearly see from the video, the tire is completely off of my vehicle, completely dismantled. It had literally exploded. And despite the officer showing up, asking what I was doing, I just reassured him, my tire exploded. I'm just trying to replace it really quickly so I can get home. I'm by myself. It's really late. And despite that and the obvious evidence, as you can see from the video, he proceeded to go underneath my car and inside my vehicle to check underneath the seats in my trunk, for what I have no idea, but I had no choice but to sit here and witness this and to experience. And I'm bringing up this specific instance because this was the night right before the September 12th Board of Trustees meeting, where I and many other students were called to Long Beach to do super important work. And as we all know, it was a very successful rally. The media attention to it was absolutely outrageous, in good ways, of course. But the entire time during this rally, I was still carrying the real life impacts that had happened to me just that night before, of police harassment. And as we all saw from that rally that day, we did experience police harassment there as well. Excessive law enforcement, police officers putting their hands on students, especially when they weren't allowing us into the building. Police dogs were present. Metal detectors were pulled out when they normally aren't. So just trying to draw parallels between the two of them. Focusing more on UPD incidents that I've experienced on campus. Here in this footage, this is one of many. I'm sitting in my car in a parking lot. And as you can see in this video, it's broad daylight. And before I had even left the parking lot, I was pulled over by a police officer for having a broken taillight. Again, broad daylight, how would you be able to tell that my taillight was broken? And I hadn't even left the parking lot on campus yet. This is, again, one of many instances I've had with police harassment, specifically from university police. I am pulled over repeatedly and I'm given a different excuse, a different reason every single time. Most of the time, they're just claiming it as routine, but we all know what that means. It's not. It's racism. It's because I'm Black, obviously Black. For every week that I was on campus, I wanted to share this stat with everyone. For every week that I was on campus in fall 2023, I was pulled over by UPD at least once. I was not on campus every single week because of the harassment and surveillance and other retaliation I faced. So of the 12 times that I was on campus, the 12 weeks, I was pulled over. So pretty much in one semester, what I'm trying to say is I was pulled over 12 times, which is absolutely outrageous. As a student organizer, and especially with all the identities and hats that I wear and that I carry, I already carry a lot of fear and cautious in every space that I enter. But for me to feel the most fearful when it comes to going to my campus where I'm supposed to be able to learn and focus on my education is terrifying. I now want to dive into the next topic, time, place, and manner policy that we all love so much. For this topic, I wanted to narrow in on one of the campus protests that I held on my campus CSU Channel Islands. In fall 2022, we had our first student-led protest calling for a deep reformation of Title IX policies. This was a huge event, not just on my campus, but also throughout the entire CSU system. And it was a successful campaign. We were able to change campus policy and implement legislation, Senate Bill 808, addressing direct reformation of the way that Title IX currently works, because we all know it does not work in favor of students and it does not work in favor of survivors. But despite holding this very successful campaign and bringing forth necessary reformation, the time, place, and manner policy was used against me and fellow SQE student organizers, especially those of color. The time, place, and manner policy can be updated and changed by campus admin at any given notice. And we learned this the hard way right after we held this campaign. Specifically with flyering, they were trying to call us for grounds for disciplinary actions because we flyered illegally for our event. But again, they didn't even have evidence that it was us. A good portion of the flyers that they brought to the table weren't even ours, but of course they pinned it on myself and fellow Black student leader. And then also following the successful campaign and after the implementation, after the media surge, after finals, just a few days before Christmas, as you can see here in the screenshot, I received a disciplinary email from the university again, calling for a meeting. Apparently, I had also violated 4 other time, place, and manner policies that didn't exist prior to that semester. So again, they can change and update these however they see fit, and they intentionally use very broad, vague language so they can stretch it however they want to suppress student voices. And I'm using this specific instance because it just speaks to how nasty campus admin can be, because it was a successful campaign. There wasn't anything wrong. There was no part in civil disobedience, nothing of the sort. SQE student organizers are experienced student organizers, and we cover all of our tracks. We know how to keep each other safe in events like this. And it just hurts and really sucks that we had to keep ourselves safe from campus admin too, on top of everything else that we have to deal with. I also want to speak to the topic of surveillance, police brutality, police harassment, the unlawful changing, constant changing of time, place, and manner policy to pin us right where they want us. These are all really heavy things. But for me, surveillance, I think, has been the one that I've struggled with the most. Here on the screen, this is a picture of myself and fellow student organizer with SQE leading a campus protest on our campus, CSU Channel Island, just last fall, in opposition to the tuition hikes approval, in opposition to the CSU's neglect towards the CFA's demands for livable wages and many other things. And also in opposition to the systemic neglect towards the genocide happening in Palestine. This was a very loaded protest, a very loaded march, a very loaded rally, and we covered many topics. And it was very powerful for myself and the huge campus community that showed up this day. So following this campus action, I had found out that our dean of students, who is known on campus for stalking me and fellow SQE leaders, showed up to do an entire surveillance mission throughout the entirety of this action. There's just a few pages of the report here on the screen, but this was an 11-page investigation report of everything that was said and done at this protest. Excuse me for... Actually, no, I'm not gonna. Every time I speak to this, I'm always like asking for patience because I do get emotional. This is very hard for me to talk about, but here in this space, I'm just gonna let myself feel freely because I recognize the importance of me speaking to this, especially in this specific space. In this 11-page investigation report that she did while stalking us throughout the entirety of the event, you can see in her notes that every time I said a word or crossed the street, she wrote this down. If I were standing in a spot for 3 minutes, she wrote that down too. Everything that I did. Reading this investigation report was extremely violating. I was so fearful. I had always known that campus admin and police had been surveilling me, but to see it done to this extent and to see it get worse and worse every semester with every successful campaign that we as students lead, it's really hard. It's very, very difficult. And this is not just on the ground work. It's also in legislative spaces. As you all know, SQE is an organizing training program. We do a lot more than just take to the streets. We do all sorts of organizing inside and outside, especially in that of ASI or student government spaces, since student government or ASI or AS is the official recognized voice of the CSU. So oftentimes in organizing spaces, when our voices are blocked out or shut out, we turn to these spaces. Instead, we are taught how to play both fields. And these are just a few screenshots of the regular occurring student government meetings that I always attend to ensure that I'm playing both sides and being as effective as I can. And in the minutes, you can see myself regularly attending these meetings. And then you can also see on the participation list, the Dean of Students started coming every single time I was in a meeting. The staff would text her on the side. She would come running in with her booklet and start taking notes on every word that I say. And if you keep tracking the minutes, you can also see that the chief of police would also come into these meetings every single time that I was trying to push for a significant resolution, like our cops off campus resolution and fighting the tuition increase resolution. So it's not just out on the field. I'm being stalked every single space that I try to advocate for students and fighting for what's right. And then, of course, disenrollment. There is so many different forms of suppression, and CSU Channel Islands took the biggest one that I don't think we ever saw coming. They just flat out disenrolled me and fellow student organizer with SQE. Following that board of trustees rally that we had, students, staff, faculty from across the state, upwards towards 700 people. And as you saw from a lot of the media releases, my face was on many of them, as well as my name, and as well as the name of my university. And it was making President Richard Yao look really bad. It was making campus admin look really bad. And the response was to just disenroll us entirely. In addition to everything that I've shared with you here on the screen with police harassment and surveillance and being treated so unjustly when I haven't done anything wrong, I am also a person. I have a real human life and I had real personal things going on at the same time as all of this. So when this hit with everything else, it was so hard. Myself and other SQE leader, we were locked out of our classes. We couldn't even access our Canva for almost an entire month. A lot of you here in this space, you are faculty, you know that when a student is absent from an academic space for a whole month, it's almost impossible to catch back up. In addition to everything else we have to face, it was really, really difficult. But I really want to highlight one really good point in this specific experience. Almost immediately after my e-board, my CFA e-board at CSU Channel Islands stepped into the picture and addressed Campus President Yao, our enrollment was almost immediately reinstated. To this day, we still have not received an explanation for why we were disenrolled for over a month. To this day, we have not received an apology for the disenrollment. But we are very grateful that our enrollment is back because of the support and solidarity that SQE has with CFA. I shared a lot of really vulnerable experiences here in the space. It's not always easy for me to share this, and though I'm always sharing it, always reliving it, a key thing to remember, I'm still experiencing it. Every single time I go to campus, I am afraid that the UPD will meet me at my classes because they've done that before, pull me over because they've done that countless times. But it needs to stop. For them to have gone this far, it needs to stop now. Also, back for those investigation notes, the 11-page report and everything that I said and did, the entire segment that our campus held in support for Palestinian liberation was not in that at all. So they can pick and choose what they choose. They can pick and choose what to document and what not to. It is getting absolutely out of hand. The brutality that students are facing across the CSU system for our advocacy work, for Palestine, for ourselves, for our marginalized folks, for everything, we can't let this continue. Thank you. And I will now pass the mic back to Akhila.
Okay, I'm wondering if we can all take a deep breath and send Angel Marie and John and his students and Sang and her students, just protection and really fortitude to get through all that comes ahead. We do have a little bit of time for some questions for the panelists. So we have one question here from an attendee, and I'll pose it to all of you. Either one of you can step in and answer. So the question is, what can we do now using CFA power to hold CSU and specifically CSU CI admin accountable for their harassment and disenrollment of Angel Marie and her co-organizer? And we can maybe expand that to ask the panelists, what are the forms of accountability and that we would like to see at each of our campuses?
Sang, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to comment on the incredible bravery that Angel Marie has for advocating for not only for herself, but also for the cause. I think what she's describing for all of us really reminds us of Deep South white supremacist strategies that are happening in California. And we have to recognize that this is how insidious white supremacy has gotten, and how low they will go, and that they will use the dirtiest of tactics in order to try to break the spirit of a person who is willing to stand up and fight back against injustice. So I think in Angel Marie's case, I think that the best thing to do is to understand that the most harm you can do to CSU Channel Islands is to diminish their social capital. And that a naming and shaming campaign might be something that, fellow student activists might want to do in coalition, because you won't be the only victim of this. They will continue to do this to other students until they are stopped, named, and shamed in public. So there are a variety of other activist interventions that you can also do, but the ones that seem to work the most on my campus is to do very public naming and shaming campaigns. So if you need to start a petition, or if you need to start working with local news agencies to share your story, it's really taxing because you have to share yourself a lot in these kind of movements. But I do think the rewards can be quite tremendous if you can do this right and in coalition with the right folks. So that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, if I could speak just a little bit towards this. So for
You
those
gotta
of you
louder, John.
Yep. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, I'm at Channel Islands, and Angel Marie is as well. Angel Marie has been an SQE, Students for Quality Education intern for 3 years now. And I'm the advisor for SQE. I sit on my local union executive board as the vice president, and the longtime advisor, now 3-year advisor for SQE. The first thing I want to say is we have been dealing with this harassment for over 2 years now. It is very important to realize we tried all the ways that were recommended to us by those who are in powerful positions and roles, right? People told us, look, contact the president of the university and set up a meeting. We did. He refused to meet because he said, and I quote, "I don't like the word demand," right? When we tried to set up meetings with the dean of students, she was more than happy to talk to us. After the dean of students, Cindy Derrico, who is now retired from her position, after she agreed to meet with us after the protest 2 falls ago, we spoke to her for 4.5 hours over Zoom. And we tried to convey the seriousness of the issues and the harassment, right? And it became ultra clear her interests were simply different than our interests. Our interests were to keep our students safe, right? And others on the campus safe, right? But the conversation she kept bringing the conversation back to policy, to the university, right? While at the same time trying to hide behind the guise of caring about students. And that's how I've been seeing this, and we've talked about this over and over. So we tried the formal ways, right? Of course, there have been reports to Title IX, but when you have a Title IX office that has a single person working for it for a year, right? It's entirely dysfunctional and nothing can happen with it. Not to mention Title IX is about liability for the university, not the safety of students, right? So other ways, right? Protests, political education, actually being in solidarity with community organizations, grassroots organizations who actually do show up for oppressed peoples, right? And when it comes to us as a union, and I'll just answer this straight up, what we could do is make a statement specifically about Angel Marie and the other students' case and go to the press with it. We've tried. Angel Marie have talked. I've been talking to a journalist for half a year, if not longer, to try to cover the story on disenrollment. He has written about 4 or 5 articles about the university since, but they've all been about our strike and other things happening on the campus, right? And he has yet to actually write this article on the disenrollment, right? As Angel Marie said, no apology has been given. Nothing has been said to them. It has never been explained to them. It wasn't explained to our local union board, right? So CFA, right, as an entire union, we could go straight to the press and say this is racially motivated, right, racist, white supremacist, or indicative of a white supremacist system, right? Harassment, suppression, stalking. It is all these things. I've seen it all. So yeah, there's no silver bullet. There's no perfect answer to this question, I don't think. But I think at the very least, CFA could speak up. And then towards the ongoing genocide in Gaza, again, CFA could go to the press and sign something stronger than the statement that we signed on March 1st. And we can make it clear that as a union, we consider this to be what it is, and that's a genocide, right? And that can go a long way, I think.
And the statement that our union signed does not mention genocide. So I think that really reflects the inadequacies of that statement. Just a quick question to Angel Marie. So when they disenrolled you, were you able to catch up with your studies, or what happened then for that semester for you?
That's a really good question, saying thank you so much. After I was disenrolled, my professors were incredibly understanding and very kind to me, but even their hands were bound by CSU administration. There's not much they could do on their end. So even after I was put back in classes and I worked until the last day of the semester catch back up, I still failed the entire semester. And that's the reality. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, I'm a senior. I was supposed to graduate this spring before the tuition increase was implemented, and now I cannot. Now I'm trapped in the CSU system even longer, giving them my money for even longer. And that's the reality of a student organizer who faces retaliation. I really wish there was a more happy ending, but there wasn't for me, unfortunately.
Angel Marie, what are the concrete forms of accountability you would like to see at Channel Islands?
First off, an apology. I need some sort of acknowledgement before anything else from campus admin that this happened. The press not taking on these stories, them not responding or denying to meet with us. It's as if it never happened. This is a real thing that happened that had real life impacts on my life and my education and my career. I need them to acknowledge that. So the apology piece must come first. Second to that, I'm not even gonna say an explanation. We all very clearly know what it is. But in terms of accountability, I need some sort of commitment, not that for me specifically, but to make sure that this would never happen to another student. Because every time I'm up on a platform, I'm giving a speech, I'm leading a march, there are students who watch me I have siblings who watch me. I have a mother who watches me. So when I experience this retaliation, what are you showing these students? What are you showing the youth? What are you showing my mom? You are discouraging students from advocating for themselves, and we can't let that continue. So I would demand, I know he doesn't like that word, but that is the word that's in order here. I would demand commitment that this would never happen again to another student in the entire state.
Absolutely. I mean, what you're describing to us basically is Jim Crow logics and practices in the new millennia. I mean, and it's like absolutely disgusting. And so as a union, we need to organize and protect our students from this type of suppression, and we need to speak more boldly and bravely than we're presently doing, which is not very bold and not very brave, quite frankly. There's more that we can do for sure, Angel Marie. We'll organize.
Okay. Another question I could ask the three panelists is, all three of you mentioned a lot of different types of organizing and a lot of, the different kinds of campaigns that you've been on at each of your campuses. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what the differences are for you, like how you've seen different reactions when you're specifically organizing for Palestinian liberation versus some of the other campaigns and the other work that you might be doing. Just curious about the intersections and the ways that these movements incite different reactions, institutional reactions.
Bullshit reactions, and harmful and violent reactions, right? And suppression. If I could, I'll give an example. So can't remember exactly when it was. I want to say it was last semester. Students for Quality Education, in a coalition with a few other groups, started looking into housing on our campus for students, which is abjectly awful. It is absolutely awful. And we're one of the more expensive campuses for student housing. And we live in a food desert. There's no grocery store within 3, 4, 5 miles, right? This has been brought to the attention of the university, of the president, of everybody over and over and over again. And they have not opened up a market close to campus. There was one there before the pandemic. They closed it down, never reopened it. Okay, so last semester, after looking into housing, SQE and the coalition decided to bring in Ventura Tenants Union, our local tenants union, to speak towards issues of housing. Basically just like tenants' rights and things like that, right? Now, I would say, like, was there any suppression? Perhaps Angel Marie has a different answer here, but like for the most part, they let us do it. There was nothing, right? And okay, cool, right? We held it in a lecture hall. Not many people came, but we recorded it. We had people participate on Zoom. It was great. This is something that all students should know, because they too will have to face the terrible housing crisis and the terrible increase of cost of living, especially rent, very soon. Now, speed up to this semester, in fact, this week, in fact, today, this is a perfect example. We have an author who is known for his writing on communism coming to campus. The author is, the event is sponsored by 3 different student organizations, including SQE, Students for Quality Education, SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, and a newly formed organization called Liberation Education, right? So in coalition, they are sponsoring this event in conjunction with an outside organization and bringing this person onto campus to give a speech and to talk about his new book, Palestine, Israel, and the US Empire. 2 days ago, I walked into my academic senate meeting. I'm a senator there on campus, and the president of academic senate called my name and said, "Hey, do you know anything about this guy coming to campus to give a speech on Palestine on Thursday?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I absolutely do, right? I do know that. My my student organizations that I advise for are sponsoring the event. And he said, well, I was told that the Ventura County Sheriff's Office called the chief of police on our campus and made them aware that this person was coming to campus. The chief of police on campus then called a special meeting of what we call the Preparedness Working Group, which they say is there to defend free speech. Both, we have cops on it, we have administrators on it, and we have faculty on it. So that's how he found out, through that group, right? And he was like, and then we looked into it and there was no formal room request and blah, 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 right? Like all this policy stuff. And he said, like, if anyone gives you any trouble, please let me know, right? So there are people who want to allow for people like this to come onto campus and give speeches, right? But I think this is like, it's absolutely evident, right? That there are certain issues, Palestine, critical race theory, right? Decolonial studies, and especially communism, right? Given our history as a country of the Red Scare and such, right? So all of this together, right, I think it's obvious there are certain topics that will bring more eyes on us, right? So I'll leave it at that.
Thing or Angel Marie, do you want to answer how what are the differences you feel in how you are treated by the institution, depending on the struggle that you're in?
On here to just further echo one of the points I made. Depending on what topic I'm advocating on does affect the retaliation that I'm facing. For example, every single time that I speak towards Palestinian liberation on my campus, it is censored out entirely. It's as if I weren't even there. Everything else is a direct siege, a total stop to what I'm doing, but everything Palestinian related just goes underneath the covers. And this is a huge, huge issue because, as John shared in his screenshot earlier during his presentation, our campus president issued out an Islamophobic email to Campus Global after the siege started on the 7th. And since then, Islamophobic hate crimes, as you would have it, started spiraling out of control on our campus. The advocacy and organizing around the genocide is needed now more than ever. So the more and more we push forward for this, the more and more we are silenced, which is very different from the other forms of retaliation that we are facing. But nonetheless, it's all the same chess game. It's all the same people, and it's all the same reason. It's all repression, and they don't want to lose space. They don't want to lose capital. They don't want the university to look any worse than it already is, because we're in a huge enrollment deficit right now. We're in an enrollment crisis at CSU Channel Islands. So yeah, I think that's a really key difference in retaliation that I wanted to point out.
So I've done a number of campaigns on my campus, social justice campaigns, as a scholar activist. So in terms of my activism around Palestine, the ways in which I get retaliated against is I basically have this like moat of silence built around me. So I've repeatedly asked my union to care. And so they either respond by striking agendas from union meetings, so I can't even enter the room to discuss Palestinian issues. And there was an emergency vote that happened 2 months ago. Akhila and I, who's my fellow co-chair, wanted to put the agenda of a draft resolution for the CFA Assembly in April to be supported by my local campus. And Ray Bucco, who is my current CFA president, did an emergency vote to strike the resolution even from the agenda. So I couldn't even attend the meeting to talk about this. And he said it was unusual, but needed. So things like that. The fact that I repeatedly have turned to statewide and my local campus about what happened to the student protester, and that I could have predicted Roth's unhinged behavior. Still no emails whatsoever, or any reach outs or calls or anything from both statewide and my local union about that. And I repeatedly have reached out to them. And just more recently, I think LA has started a Palestine Arab Muslim Caucus group on their campus that's supported by their e-board. And so I turned to Chris Cox and Ray Bucco again, because I was told by LA, these are the persons you turn to. And Chris Cox is the CRJ Council for Race and Social Justice rep, and Ray Bucco is the president. And I said that, we're going to, given light about what just happened, I think we really need to have a Palestinian Arab Muslim caucus. Again, silence. So this moat of silence is built around me, where they treat me as a non-person and not even worthy of a response. So that's one thing. When I whistleblow in other contexts, so like when I whistleblowed against some fiscal improprieties that were happening in my department when I was still untenured, a junior faculty member. Now that was interesting. There was no mode of silence. There was absolutely direct retaliation. I was able to get my tenure, but I had to go up for promotion 4 times consecutively in order to be promoted to full. And each time they created new rules to try to prevent me from getting my promotion. There was a person who with a conflict of interest that served on my college RTP level who spoke out against me in my whistleblowing. There was the provost, the current provost at my university invented new rules for the RTP. He said that my book had to be reviewed in order for it to be considered for my RTP. It's just nutty stuff. So it depends on the issue, how they're going to retaliate against you. But definitely for Palestine, provost won't email me, talk to me. President won't email me, talk to me. Everyone's just mode of silence around me. I'm a non-person.
Thank you for 3 powerful testimonies, answers to that question. There is one more question in the Q&A about the students on the different campaigns that we've mentioned at the panel today. So if either of you could speak to the well-being of what happened to the students at SLO who were arrested, brutalized, the video of which many of us saw, and saying also, a check-in on your students at San Jose State, how they're doing after the assaults.
Yeah. My provost was there at the protest on February 19th, and I mentioned SLO to him. I was like, did you know what happened at SLO with the police? Because I saw the police kind of interacting with the protesters rather aggressively and being very verbally demeaning to them. And so I was very concerned about where this could go. And I told my provost then, I was like, did you know what happened at SLO? Did you see the video? And I don't know, he pretended like he didn't know. And so I filled him in. And I said, I'm worried that something like this is going to happen right now, unless you have control over SJSU PD. I think it's interesting that, these administrators are claiming to not know about police suppression of student protesters on other campus. I'm not sure I quite believed them at the time. But what I saw was that I expressed my concern, and I don't think he did anything to make the SJSU PD comport a little bit more professionally in the situation.
And how are the students doing? Are they're?
I think they're rattled for sure. I think that they're really pissed off. But a Zionist speaker that was scheduled to come Monday has canceled, and all co-sponsorships have been withdrawn. And the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion has stated to me informally that they will no longer co-sponsor anything moving forward. And I told them that I don't think they're competent enough to do stuff like that. So it's probably a good idea if they don't co-sponsor, especially if they're not willing to do any research on people that they co-sponsor with. So some marginal gains, but we'll see about this retaliation, the student conduct thing, because if there is a letter that is put into the SJP student org file, then I see that as student repression. I see calling in the SJP president as student repression, since they had nothing to do with the organizing of the walkouts, yet they got targeted for a student conduct office meeting. And they were also hauled into a police meeting. I wasn't granted access to them And yeah, I'm very concerned about these meetings without a witness that seem to be going on with SJP and SGSU.
And a final question that I feel everyone in the Q&A is like hinting at, which is that we know, or we have a sense of what institutional mechanisms of accountability would be nice. What are the things that the three of you think we as individuals, faculty, students, union staff, as individual, what can we do as individuals to support you all and support these campaigns?
I mean, I don't think we can unsee what's happening to Angel Marie. So I think we need to do some immediate and direct organizing around what's happening with her. And not just, at Channel Islands, but also, the 23 campus wide. We have assets, we have experience, we have knowledge, we have skills, and we can definitely come up with a game plan to make sure that Angel Marie gets some semblance of justice for what has happened to her, and then also some guarantees, at least in the future, that it won't happen. Because Jim Crow practices should not be happening at Channel Islands. This is like, the third millennia, and we really need to push back very, very vigorously, and we need union support and resources from a faculty level to also push back on that, for sure.
Thank you so much, Sang. I think in addition to that, also what I think would be really helpful to all the students across the state who are experiencing suppression around our campaigns, public collective solidarity statements from every campus, every e-board, every department, because that does, one, raise awareness what's happening. I know some folks in our chat were mentioning that they didn't even know that this was happening in the CSU. So that awareness piece, I think, is crucial before we do anything else. I think, once people become aware of what's happening, the organizing piece will come easier. So these public solidarity statements, as many and as much as we can, would be huge. Second to that, for all of the folks who are in this call, who are tuning in, who are near e-boards, or CFA membership, if you know student activists, like I know we're already like wearing multiple hats, taking on multiple roles, but a casual check-in really might just like make a difference and change that student organizer's life. I know that there are so many student organizers who are facing repression and they don't even know it. So sometimes they just need guidance. They just need the language to fit their situation. And our CFA faculty, our CFA membership are so good at doing that. It's always a pleasure standing in solidarity with y'all. I think that piece is also crucial. Also, for myself and other student organizers who've been facing repression, especially at what happened at SLO, when you have these violent police officers tackling student organizers to the ground, and we see that it's almost as if they're sending this clear message. Every time I'm being pulled over, they're saying this clear message. This is what happens when you advocate as a student. And we have to make sure that we cancel out that message. That message cannot be one sent out. And that's a large part in what we're hoping to do with the upcoming Board of Trustees action, the student march, addressing the tuition increase, addressing the student suppression happening statewide. So those are other ways I think that we could also support.
You and the other students are an incredible inspiration. That's all I have to say.
If I may add just a little piece, educate yourselves, learn with others, reach out to us, reach out to your student activists, come to events, right? And most importantly, be loud about it, right? Like be loud about, right now, Palestine, about police brutality, right? And hey, teach it in your classes, work it into your curriculum. If you're doing math, computer science, sociology, history, just work it in, right? And let's be real, right? Sometimes civil disobedience of other types is necessary. So maybe some of us more privileged people in these positions need to put our bodies on the line a little bit and need to go out there and join the students when they are demonstrating against weapons manufacturers, or join the students at the Board of Trustees office. And when a cop puts their hands on a student, I'm not advocating for anything here. I'm not saying there's a plan, but maybe you occupy those cushy chairs that the Board of Trustees sit on during their meetings, right? And right, that this is historically, this is how real change gets done, right? So I'll kick it back to you, Akhila.
Well-
Nothing illegal though.
You are scheduled to close us out, John. So thank you all for being here, and I will pass it to John.
All right, this will be quick, y'all. It's gonna be weird because we just realized this. You don't hear claps, I don't think, on Zoom. I guess they've suppressed that form of speech through Zoom. But I will try anyway. And no matter where you are, especially if you're in at a university right now, especially a crowded hall or something like that, please clap along with us. We're going to do a Gaza clap in solidarity with the Gazans and other Palestinians who are currently facing the ongoing genocide and oppression, apartheid, all of this stuff. I'll show you the rhythm. We'll do it 5 times, and at the end we'll yell Gaza. So it's okay. Gaza. All right. So 1, 2, 3. Gaza. 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 Thank you all. Much love.